email address, we will follow up. So while we show you a brief video of some of the highlights of our work in the field, please send us your questions. Well, there really are many challenges for both parents and educators. Luckily, this entire webcast has featured strategies that educators and parents can use to overcome these challenges and to set the stage for strong parental involvement. And as you can see, we've set the stage for some tough questions. We had to put our panelists in some comfy chairs because we've got some good questions that they need to answer. We've already had several questions submitted by our audience, but there's still time. Please use the form on the webpage to submit your questions, and don't forget to include your email address in case we run out of time. Laura, the first question is for you. This is a really good one. Kind of gets to the heart of our webcast today. What are some of the practices that research suggests for helping parents support their children's learning?
Okay, John, I think most of the research on student academic achievement clearly says that direct support to parents in supporting their children's learning is what is needed and what seems to work. Actually, what that means then for schools is that they have to then work with parents, either in training or some kind of parent education, to ensure that they know how to do that with their children. So it's very clear about direct support to parents or training for parents.
So direct support would then be training for school staff, faculty and staff that then help them understand how to
do that with parents.
Great.
Absolutely.
Great, fantastic. Anybody else have any comments they want to say about how many they have seen success through training programs of this way?
I think she covered it pretty well.
Yeah. Okay, well, great. We have this one from Washington, D.C., where we're located today. This question, Helmer, why don't we start with you?
Okay.
How has parent involvement been successful in communities where parents are generally disenfranchised and they're not used to being engaged?
That's a very good question. It's a very common situation for many communities out there. We have found that when you do an informal assessment of the reasons why folks are not being involved, you've determined what's the best approach, and it's going to be different from location to location because there are going to be different needs. Parents are going to have different necessities and different obstacles. So there's no true answer, really. You really have to look at your community and determine what is the best approach, what have you tried, what's working in other locations, and also talk to the parents and determine really what would help them become more involved.
Great answer. I think we saw on, especially the video from Matt Perkins, where he talked about how they assessed the needs of what the community was about, and they would have the teachers call the parents and talk to them, and I thought that was one success story that is kind of related to this idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think in most communities you have some natural leaders. They may be leading other efforts that aren't related to education, and if you can kind of pinpoint who those are and approach them and engage them in the education process, and then that whole relationship built on trust can happen because the people in the community already trust this person as a leader in other avenues. So it's really walking the streets, knocking on doors, going to the community centers and finding who those natural leaders are in the community.
Maybe going to different places in the community where parents might be involved with their religious institutions or any other community centers type of thing?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yep.
And then is there any way that, have you had any success with trying to pull those people? Do they receive different kinds of training? Like Laura was talking about training teachers to work with parents. Would you work with those kind of leaders maybe differently, or?
I think that you can get a lot from that. You can gain the cultural aspects. You can better understand what the background is, what the traditional parental involvement is with that particular group, especially with our different ethnicities that are coming now into our small rural communities, and where there are very few people that really understand and they can relate to what are the issues facing the new arrivals.
Great.
And we've seen through the Commonwealth Institute for Parent Leadership that we've brought in those community leaders like Eddie Woods that you saw earlier in the videotape, and done the same training that we do for parents, because we are just teaching the basics about the education standards that children are expected to learn, and so it's nothing any different than you would teach a parent.
Right. Well, I've learned from this process by getting to meet some of these great people we've had on the webcast, how they've talked about how the training has been very important to them and helpful to them, and it's helped them to move beyond, the bake sale idea or, the being the room mother or whatever. So that's really great information. We have a question from Kentucky, so let's start with our Kentucky girl here, Miss Cindy. Oh, this is a great question, and I think this is one that we get very often. Why is it more difficult to get parents involved in high schools than in elementary or middle schools?
Well, I think there's several things going on. And being a parent of a high school student and a middle school student, I've been through each of the different levels of education. And when you're in elementary school, the teacher has 30 kids maybe that they're responsible for, and it's a lot easier for them to be in control of who the leader parents are and communicate with them. And then when you move to middle and high school, the teachers have 150 children that they're responsible for, and it's very difficult for them, especially if you're trying to reach parents that may not have a telephone or the telephone number keeps getting disconnected. So at the middle and high school level, it becomes really important to develop this network of mentors or advocates that you can train and then in turn send them out to build a relationship with the families, and then they become the translator, if you will, of the educational material for the teacher, even though we're still speaking about English-speaking families, and then Helmer can speak about real translators when you're dealing with non-English speaking families. Right. The other phenomena that happens is when you move from elementary to middle and high, you're going through that natural progression of trying to make the children independent and self-sufficient, and sometimes there's a tendency of schools to want to push the parents back a little bit to say, these kids need to grow up a little bit, because we need to teach them how to be productive in the world on their own. And parents tend to say, oh, okay, well, I can relax a little bit. When in fact, we still need to do that piece, but schools need to work with parents in a different way now.
Good point.
On the academic expectations and build up that side of it, because that's where the kids still need a tremendous amount of help.
Right. There's a difference between being self-sufficient and being collaborative with your child and supporting your child in what they're doing. I think that's a great point. Anybody else have any experiences with helping different groups at different levels be involved? I know when I moved from being a middle school to a high school teacher, and there really is a different level of involvement that you see in parents there, but it doesn't mean it has to be that way, especially in academic engagement.
Right.
Well, great. We've got some more that have come in. I don't have a city or state from this one, but this one says, oh, well, this one we got several times. I think we have several questions about programs, actual programs. And this says, my district is searching for ways to construct a more systematic or a systemic program that will reach all parents more effectively. And I'd like to mention that what we've been talking about today, this framework, is just one of several different training programs that are available. So NCFL has developed the All Your Parents Equals AYP program to be able to go into schools and to go into districts and to work with them in professional development. But there are others that were mentioned today, the CIPL, the Commonwealth, right, which has become now nationwide. And there are also, of course, the Parent Information Resource Centers. And whether those are new centers, and I'm glad to say that NCFL and Edvantia are working together on a new PERC in West Virginia. We now hold that contract in West Virginia. There are also established centers in many states that people can draw upon. So there are a lot of different resources, both state and national, for that kind of idea.
Can I just add a point to that, John? I think it's really just essential that schools really think about adopting a framework or a model that will guide their work in parent involvement. Jerry mentioned today on the webcast about from North Carolina, talked about random acts of professional involvement. That's not what we want. We really want schools to be thinking carefully and planning for parent involvement within their school and within their community. And that really requires looking at a framework or a model for how they might do that.
Right, and I really liked what Helmer said earlier today about looking at the mission and seeing how that involves from the very core, how does that involve parents? And all learning is contextual, and it's all set in certain places, and there are different things that are important to every school. And so that framework may look different in your school than in my school, but it's really helpful advice that you just can't go out and buy a program and think it's going to come in and work. You have to really work at making sure it's going to meet the needs of your school, that you've identified what those needs are first. And I know Laura is really clear about being able to look at data and helping parents to understand data to know what are the kinds of things that you need to go on in your school.
Yeah, and at the parent level, it's also very important to have a systemic model of training for the parents, because sometimes schools get fooled because they'll have a real strong parent come in every once in a while and really take charge and do the things that they, lead the school in parent involvement, but then that parent moves on, the child graduates, and you're left at square one again. You haven't built any capacity. So you really need to focus on building that capacity.
Right. And your capacity is really good because I just called you Laura and you're still responding. So it's okay. This is a really great question, and I think we might ask Helmer, how do we engage parents in their children's learning when they themselves have low literacy skills?
Well, it sounds like an opportunity to create a component called adult education, where parents can come in and gain their own skills and make gains, rather, in their own levels through adult basic education. Maybe it could be English as a second language. But again, going back to the assessment, determine whether, in fact, this is something that the parents are interested in, and that you have the appropriate space and that you have the appropriate materials. You may look at some tutoring. You might look at some opportunities through the web-based learning. But really look at how you can build those capacities within the parents themselves so that they can see how they can be part of this process. The other thing to do also is to engage the parents through where the child are learning, what we call PAC time in family literacy. Have the parents sit side by side and see what the teacher is actually teaching the children, and that way that can become the content for their own academic attainment. And then to have somebody reinforce that, it's just a win-win. So again, look at the parents' ability to increase their own skills.
I know in some of the schools we visited to prepare for this webcast, and then in talking to some of the parents, they talk about going into a school and following the child's schedule for the day, maybe even sitting in the child's desk, and kind of getting the perspective of what it's like to be a kid when the bells are ringing and you've got 4 minutes to get to class and you got to go to the bathroom and you got to talk to your friend and get your homework, and maybe parents didn't grow up in that environment, or parents, a parent is not involved in what it's like to be a student today.
And I think also it creates more of a motivational factor when the parents are actually understanding that this is what my child is learning. I can apply this. This is tangible. This is something that I can go and reinforce at home when we do the homework. So there's a better connection when you bridge those both generations.
Right. And as kind of a technology person, I like to intersperse my bias and say that there are a lot of schools who are doing some interesting things with technology involving parents. I know in Roanoke, Virginia, they've had children as young as 3rd grade bring in grandparents and parents and help teach them about the internet and what does it mean to use the internet and what does it mean as a socializing factor. And there are schools who are doing training for parents where students are actually training their parents how to use different technologies. So parents, I didn't grow up with a computer in my school, so maybe parents who have children now who are using word processing and using spreadsheets don't have that experience, so it's an opportunity for them to go and to experience that as well.
I know in Kentucky we're doing the individual learning plans that's tied into the Council on Post-Secondary Education, and the kids have taken to it like wildfire, and the counselors have been overwhelmed by having to learn this new technology and show it to all the kids, but the minute they show it to the kids are eating it up and taking it even further than the counselor knows how to take it. So I think technology turns our kids on, and we need to utilize it as much as possible.
Right, and it's also a way then to help by using those students, bringing those parents in, doing some focus work with the parents about this is what this technology can do for you, and this is how you can be involved with your child in long-term engagement in learning, because this is being involved, kids as young as middle school are looking at how can I focus my education towards what I want to do when I leave school.
I would just caution that you make sure that the parents are exposed to the technology prior to actually presenting it between the parent and the child.
Excellent
so that
idea.
The child does not assume the leadership role and the parent then backs off and and it just becomes the learner, but rather than this is what you're going to be looking at when your child, this is what it is, so that the parent is empowered, so when they sit there in front of the computer they feel that I know what this is, and they can engage their children.
Elmer, I'm so glad you said that because this next question I think kind of relates. This question says, please address us how we deal with parents who genuinely do not believe that parents should be partners in education, possibly because of a culture, because they were brought up in a different culture. And it might be a different culture in terms of technology, or it might be a different culture by where they have come from. But how do we deal with parents who feel that it's the school's job to educate the parent and they step back?
Yeah, that's another very common problem that we're seeing, especially folks that are coming from countries where traditionally, you went and dropped off your child and you picked them up afterwards, and there was very little demand on the school's behalf of involving the parent. But we know that here in the United States it's very different. We know that the schools are expecting the parents to be involved at one level or another. And so in that case, we as educators need to help our parents understand how they can engage their children. We need to really show that these are the things that you can do. You can come in, you can volunteer, you can participate this way, et cetera, et cetera. The parents, they want to do that. They want to participate. They want their children to succeed, but they don't know how. So it's up to us to show them how. And maybe we can start with small little things, and then gradually, as the confidence and the intrinsic motivation grows, we can then involve them at different levels. So yeah, let's open up the doors and let's show the parents exactly what we mean by parental involvement, what we mean by come and get involved in your child's education. We're not saying to come and teach your child how to read and write, not yet, but at first maybe we were talking about just come in and help out with fundraising, come in and help out with a trip and as a chaperone, et cetera, et cetera. So let's just begin to gradually change that mindset, especially once again in those parents that traditionally have not seen their role within the educational attainment of their children.
So with those children, for those parents, maybe getting them in the door and getting them involved in some of the more traditional ways and slowly helping them realize they can be partners in their child's education.
Exactly.
Right, and I think a critical factor in that, and Helmer was alluding to that, is that we make the school a welcoming place for families from the very beginning. It's very much a welcoming place, and we talked about climate and how important that is to making sure that families do come into the school and they're involved. Just being there and feeling comfortable is certainly a key.
I've got to relate a story. You may have noticed that Donna and I have visited some of these schools in our region, and one of the first schools we went to was pouring down rain, 7 o'clock in the morning, dark, and waiting for the buses to. And there was a teacher standing out in the parking lot with an umbrella, a bright, colorful umbrella, and a rain hat, a big galoshes. And we pulled up and we said, "We're here to visit. Come right in. We're expecting you. We're so glad you could be here." That says so much. And that parent, there's a teacher out there every day to meet the buses and to meet the kids and to meet the parents. So that's truly a wonderful way where schools are really embodying what's going on. Yeah. Well, I'd like to stay and talk more about some of the questions that we've had, but our time has come to an end. If we didn't have time to answer your questions, we'll have our expert panel respond to them by email. I'd also like to remind you that you can soon access this entire webcast, as well as a transcript and related resources via the website of the Appalachia Regional Comprehensive Center at www.arc.edvantia.org. Another set of resources are those Parent Information Resource Centers that I mentioned earlier, also called PERCs. And as I said, Edvantia and NCFL are working together in the new West Virginia PERC. I'd like to thank all the educators and parents who contributed to today's webcast, including State Superintendent Dr. June Atkinson and her staff at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, parents, students, and staff at A.B. Combs Elementary School in Raleigh, North Carolina, Principal Matt Perkins from Cardinal Valley Elementary in Lexington, Kentucky, Barbara Hulver and our 4 middle school principals from Loudoun County, Virginia, and our parent leaders and mentors from Kentucky. Most importantly, I'd like to thank our experts from today and our project staff from the National Center for Family Literacy and Cindy Baumert, our parent leader, for sharing your expertise. The Appalachia Regional Comprehensive Center's next webcast will be held on Thursday, June 28th. Please check our website for details on that next webcast and how to register. Oh, and please take a moment to complete the evaluation survey of this event so we can make our future events more helpful for you. The link is on the webpage. Thanks again for watching. I'm John Ross from the Appalachia Regional Comprehensive Center at Edvantia.